When everything falls apart, the first thing you realize is that the people who once swore they'd stand by you until the end vanish. Not just a few of them, almost all. They don't need to warn you, they don't need to explain. They simply disappear as if you never existed. That's when you face a brutal truth. Life doesn't respect loyalty, it only respects usefulness. When you have value, you're pursued, admired. When you lose it, you're pushed aside without mercy. This feeling is both painful and sobering. Painful because you're left stranded on the battlefield. Sobering because, for the first time, you see the true nature of the game. You once believed that living sincerely and loving wholeheartedly would be repaid with fairness. But fairness is a beautiful illusion people use to keep you obedient. Out there, no one is counting the times you sacrificed. No one cares how much you gave. They measure your worth in the present moment. And when you no longer meet their expectations or fulfill their needs, the relationship plummets instantly. This isn't personal betrayal, it's a cold law of the world, one most people don't have the courage to face. This fall, as cruel as it is, comes as a disguised gift. It strips away every layer of deception, every empty promise, every calculating glance. It frees you from the burden of maintaining a likable image, from straining to please everyone. Once the illusion is dead, there's no reason to keep performing. You can rise again not to be loved, but to become untouchable. This marks the transformation, from someone living inside an illusion to someone acting according to the raw truth. The truth is, no one builds strength when everything is comfortable. You only become dangerous once you've tasted the bitterness of loss, when your name is whispered as a failure, when you feel the deafening silence of those who once cheered for you. In the emptiness where no one saves you, with hands trembling in anger, the steel within begins to form. This is the moment where survival instinct and ambition fuse into one. You no longer need anyone to come back, nor wait for anyone's recognition. Instead, accept that isolation is now your territory, a place where you learn to operate differently, no longer seeking approval, no longer asking permission to exist. The goal is no longer to blend in, but to become a force others must account for, even when they don't want to. You start observing more, speaking less, and acting with cold calculation. This is not a game for soft emotions. This is the battlefield for those who know how to turn pain into discipline, silence into strategy. You stop asking, why did they do that? Because the answer won't change the outcome. Instead, you ask, how do I make sure this never happens again? That question turns pain into fuel, loss into a form of capital. Capital you will use to buy back your mental freedom. When the world thinks you're finished, understand that it's only the end of the weaker version of you. You've just unlocked a space you never knew you needed a space for reconstruction. Here, every action serves the goal of becoming untouchable. Every decision is weighed for its long-term impact, not to please others, but to fortify your position. You stop chasing false peace and start creating it yourself through the power of control. What you've lost was necessary to clear the ground for what you're about to build. No more fake pats on the back, no more expectant eyes waiting for you to keep serving. Instead, you now have a new domain, one that belongs only to you and your objectives. To live here, you cannot afford weakness. Any trace of it is an open invitation for the world to step in and destroy you again. And you've sworn never to let that happen. Remember, collapse is not the end. It's a hidden door to a level of reality most will never reach because they're too afraid to lose their false sense of safety. But you, once stripped of everything to cling to, will find yourself freer than ever, free from pretending, free to rebuild from the foundation of the naked truth, and free to become a version the world will never dare to underestimate again. You cannot step into a new chapter while carrying the corpse of your old self. The version that once begged for acceptance, feared being disliked, and agreed when wanting to say no, must be buried deep without mercy. Keeping it alive only forces you to drag along the weight of someone who has already lost, someone molded by the world into the shape others desired. And on the battlefield, any part of you that is weak will be exploited until you fall again. The death of the old self is not a gentle moment, it is an execution within. You must face every weak habit that turned you into a target: excessive compliance, the hunger for recognition, the dependence on praise. These are the chains binding you to a victim's state. Each chain must be broken with resolve by dismantling the false belief that, if I am better, they will treat me more fairly. The world does not operate on fairness. It operates on power and interest. The old self is the one who negotiates with the enemy, believing reconciliation is the path to survival. But reconciling with someone willing to use you as a shield is the same as willingly putting your head in the noose. On the battlefield, those who refuse to define themselves will be defined by others, and when you allow others to define you, you hand them control over your fate. The new self must be born from absolute initiative, from the will that refuses to let anyone set conditions for your existence. Rebirth does not begin by searching for something new, but by destroying the old. You cannot build a fortress on rotten foundations. You must tear down, clear out, burn away everything that once made you predictable and easy to control. Every decision, every habit, every relationship must be examined with one question: does this strengthen or weaken my position? If it weakens, it must go. No compromise, no nostalgia. Rebirth on the battlefield means accepting that you will be misunderstood, called cold, labeled emotionless. Let them think so. The truth is, you no longer live to keep them comfortable. You live to become untouchable. To achieve this, the approval of others must be excluded from your strategy. In this environment, every smile you give, every piece of information you reveal must be calculated. Predictability is a form of vulnerability, and your new self has no room for it. When the old self dies, you will feel an emptiness, the space once occupied by the longing to be loved, forgiven, acknowledged. Do not rush to fill it with something softer. This emptiness is the ground where you will lay a new foundation of discipline, sharpness, and awareness of personal power. This is when you learn to stand without support, to remain silent even when provoked, and to control your reactions so no one can predict your next move. The self born on the battlefield is nothing like the one that existed before. It does not seek peace as a gift, but creates peace by eliminating every threat before it takes root. It does not call for justice from others, but defines justice by protecting its own interests. It does not dream of recognition, but builds a reputation through undeniable results. Everything is measured by effectiveness, not likability. The fall that once caused you pain is the initiation rite of your new self. Every scar is a carved lesson. Never hand weapons to others through blind trust. Never let emotional needs cloud your strategy. Never allow anyone to hold the key to your inner peace. These are the things the old self never understood, and that is why it had to be killed. You do not become ruthless to take revenge. You become ruthless because kindness without discipline is an invitation for exploitation. Your ruthlessness is controlled, directed, and used only to secure your mental territory, eliminate threats, and maintain position. It is not chaos, it is order you impose, whether others understand it or not. Bury the old self deep and never return to dig it up. No memorials, no regrets. It served its only purpose, to show you exactly who you never want to be again. Every time you feel tempted to return to those weak habits, remember, it is the same as inviting the world to destroy you once more, and you have sworn never to let that happen. The new self does not need permission to exist. It does not need praise, nor an audience. It needs only one thing: the power to decide and to act without wavering. Living in this new form means you are no longer seeking a seat at someone else's table. You are the one who sets the table, defines the rules, and decides who gets to sit. Rebirth on the battlefield means that from now on, every move you make is calculated to win, not to be forgiven. Kindness that isn't protected by strength becomes an open invitation for exploitation. In a world where weakness is treated as opportunity, ruthlessness isn't a luxury, it's a requirement for survival. But ruthlessness here is not blind chaos. It is disciplined ruthlessness, controlled, directed, and applied with surgical precision. You don't need to display power with shouting or public theatrics. You don't slam the table for attention. You let your silence create pressure. When you step into a room, your strength doesn't come from showmanship, but from the way you observe quiet, razor sharp, making others cautious even before a single word is spoken. Disciplined ruthlessness begins by eliminating every unconscious reaction. You don't retaliate because you're provoked. You act only when you know it is the necessary move and the advantage is clear. That demands the ability to restrain hot impulses, because ungoverned anger is a gift you hand to those who want to break you. Discipline lets you choose the timing of the strike, and that timing is always when the opponent least expects it. Real power lies in the ability to apply pressure without violence. A gaze that holds a few seconds longer can force others to guess what you're thinking. When they guess, they reveal. And when they reveal, you hold the edge. That is the essence of disciplined ruthlessness, turning the opponent's waiting into a tool that unlocks their weaknesses. The weak believe unconditional niceness is the pinnacle of character, but unconditional kindness in a harsh environment only makes you a free resource for others to harvest. Disciplined ruthlessness doesn't mean abandoning your humanity. It means knowing how to set limits. You choose who receives your kindness and who must meet your hardness. The difference between chaotic ruthlessness and disciplined ruthlessness is the objective. Chaotic ruthlessness acts to gratify the ego. Disciplined ruthlessness acts to protect territory, solidify position, and ensure survival. This is not a game of feelings, it is a problem of strategy. You deploy resources only when you're certain the investment yields a return in power. When you practice disciplined ruthlessness, you learn to view every situation through the lens of interest. Who benefits if you go soft? Who loses control when you hold your boundaries? Who will try to break you if they smell weakness? These questions become instinct, cleansing you of naivety and replacing it with a cold evaluation system. Disciplined ruthlessness also requires the ability to stay silent when needed. Not every victory comes from action. Many victories come from refusing to enter a battle staged for you to lose. The undisciplined get dragged into conflict to prove something. The disciplined understand that not reacting preserves energy and drops the opponent into an empty trap. Operating with disciplined ruthlessness sends a clear message. You are not someone who can be steered by emotion. No one can force you into snap reactions. Everything unfolds at the tempo you choose. That compels others to adjust to you, not the other way around. Those accustomed to a softer version of you will be confused, even irritated, when they realize you've changed the rules. They will label you cold, distant, or ruthless. Accept those labels as part of the strategy. When they lose the ability to predict you, they lose control. And when they lose control, you reclaim the position that was once taken from you. Disciplined ruthlessness doesn't mean you seek conflict. It means you're prepared to respond with precision when conflict is unavoidable. You don't chase petty wins to feed the ego. You play the long game, conserve resources, choose the right moment, and when you strike, the strike ends the problem immediately. Remember, the world was not built to reward soft kindness. It respects strength, steadiness, and the ability to protect yourself. Disciplined ruthlessness is how you make yourself someone who cannot be cornered. It is the union of a discerning heart and a calculating mind. And when you possess it, you don't just survive, you set the rules and force others to adapt if they want to exist within your orbit. No stronghold is more important than the fortress inside your own mind. Everything you possess externally, money, status, relationships, is rented property. Only one thing is permanent ownership: the ability to control and operate your own thoughts. When the mental fortress is built solid, every storm outside becomes nothing more than distant noise. Building a mental fortress is not a one-day task. It is the process of laying each brick of discipline, each barrier of awareness, each wall of experience. You begin by eliminating the mental patterns that allow others to easily infiltrate: impulsiveness, emotional reactivity, the fear of being misunderstood. Every time you let emotions lead, You open a gate for others to step in and occupy your mental territory. Your mission is to close, lock, and reinforce every one of those gates. A fortress cannot stand without watchtowers. In the mind, watchtowers are the constant ability to observe watching how people react when you remain silent, noticing small changes in words and actions, recognizing unusual pauses. This is not extreme suspicion. It is an early warning system that ensures you are never ambushed. Once the fortress is in place, the strategy of silence becomes the electric fence surrounding it. Silence is not merely the absence of words. It is the deliberate withholding of information, emotions, and plans. You never let others know what you're thinking, preparing, or planning to do next, because once they know, they can block, sabotage, or exploit it. Keeping silent means keeping the advantage. Most people make the mistake of thinking they must explain, must present themselves so others understand them. But a mental fortress doesn't need to be understood, it needs to be secure. When you over-explain, you not only hand over the keys but also invite others to stroll around your territory. The strategy of silence shields you from this intrusion. It forces others to guess, and when they guess, they expose gaps. Silence is also where you find clarity. In chaos, the loud ones often shoot themselves by speaking too much. The silent one observes, analyzes, and acts at the right moment. When you don't react immediately, you force the situation to reveal more information. That is how you turn time into an ally. An effective strategy of silence doesn't mean you disappear entirely. On the contrary, your presence must be strong enough to be felt even when you say nothing. This comes from the way you control every action, every glance, every pause. When others sense that something is happening beyond their reach, they begin to calculate based on fear rather than reality. And fear is a far more potent tool of control than any open threat. The mental fortress also filters out external noise, praise, criticism, rumors, social pressure. Everything is processed through its solid walls. You don't allow these sounds to penetrate and dictate your next move. You permit only the necessary data to enter, and that data must pass through your strict selection. When you master silence, you also master the pace of the game. Others will try to push you to react, decide quickly, or say what they want to hear. Each time you refuse to rush, you pull them into your playing field, where you decide when the game moves forward. Silence becomes the way you control tempo, and tempo is power. The combination of a mental fortress and a strategy of silence turns you into an opponent others cannot predict and cannot easily approach. They may see you, hear about you, but they cannot grasp you. Each time they try, they receive only fragments, never enough to form the full picture. And it is precisely this incompleteness that makes them uneasy, impatient, and ultimately prone to mistakes. In a noisy world, the one who knows how to keep silent becomes the shadow that every eye must follow. When you step out from your mental fortress, every action carries weight because it happens rarely. Every word you speak becomes an event because it is not diluted in constant noise. And every move you make holds gravity because it has been carefully calculated behind your walls. Maintaining your mental fortress is the promise you make to yourself. No one enters without invitation. No insult shakes your inner pillars. No external storm destroys the foundation you've built. And the strategy of silence is the vow that, from now on, you will never hand your weapons to others through your own predictability. Empathy is often praised as a gentle virtue. But when you step into the battlefield of power and survival, what you need is not unconditional empathy, but cold empathy, a form of deep, precise understanding kept at a safe distance. It allows you to read people like a book without letting their emotions rewrite your own story. Cold empathy begins with observation. You don't just hear what they say, you hear the silence between the sentences. You notice how their tone shifts when mentioning a topic, how their eyes move when avoiding something, how their hands tighten when defending themselves. Every detail is a fragment of a psychological map. When you connect these fragments, the picture becomes far clearer than their words suggest. The core of cold empathy is separating your personal emotions from the information you gather. You can understand someone's pain without dissolving yourself into it. You recognize their fears, desires, and weaknesses, not to share in them, but to predict their next move and adjust your strategy. This knowledge makes you the one who leads, because you're always one step ahead in the psychological game. Those without discipline and empathy let other people's emotions dictate their own decisions. They get pulled into spirals of guilt, pity, or anger, whether the other person creates them intentionally or not. Cold empathy works differently. You stay outside the spiral, observe it, identify its rules, and then use those rules to steer the situation toward your own advantage. Cold empathy is also the art of speaking your opponent's language. When you understand someone's values, beliefs, and fears, you can choose words that touch exactly where they will react. This isn't blind manipulation, it's the skill of guiding the direction of a conversation. You make them feel understood, while in reality, you're leading them to the conclusion you want. Its sharpness lies in detecting falsehood before it becomes a threat. You can see the masks people wear, the way they embellish their stories to protect their self-image. You don't need to expose them immediately. Sometimes letting them keep performing gives you more information. Every detail they reveal on their own is ammunition you can use later if necessary. When practicing cold empathy, you don't react to immediate emotional triggers. Instead, you log them as data. You observe how they use emotions to shape the behavior of others, and you learn to become immune to that attack. Immunity doesn't mean you're emotionless, it means you control your reactions, ensuring every response serves your objective. Another crucial element is the ability to anticipate betrayal. Most betrayals are not sudden, they're signaled by subtle changes, a growing distance, a compliment that turns forced, a broken habit. Cold empathy lets you detect these signals early, so you can prepare or withdraw before the ambush lands. Those with cold empathy don't seek recognition. They don't need to be praised as understanding or empathetic. The goal isn't to become someone's emotional counselor, it's to remain the one holding the steering wheel. They understand that in the game of power, whoever understands the other first controls what happens next. You will be tempted to soften, to break the distance, to become the comforter. But remember, distance is what keeps you safe and allows you to maintain a strategic view. When you're too close, you lose the ability to see the full picture. Cold empathy keeps you at the right range, close enough to see clearly, far enough not to be pulled in. In practice, cold empathy doesn't make you inhuman. On the contrary, it enables you to use your understanding of people to make rational, effective decisions, instead of being swayed by impulsive reactions. You can help, but never at the cost of your own stability and power. Train this ability daily. Listen more than you speak. Observe more than you react. Record more than you judge. Every piece of information you gather is another brick in your strategic fortress. And when the time comes, you will use those bricks to build the path that leads others exactly where you want them to go, while they still believe it was their own choice. Everything that once brought you to your knees leaves a mark. Not just faded scars over time, but hidden blueprints recording exactly how you were defeated, who inflicted it, and why you couldn't defend yourself. Most people choose to forget. They bury the memory in a dark corner and pretend it never happened. But forgetting is not healing. Forgetting is handing others the right to repeat it again. Weaponizing pain begins by facing it as you would look into a mirror. No turning away, no excuses, no lulling yourself with "it's all in the past." You examine every fracture in your mind and ask, what in me allowed this to happen? What signals did I ignore? What did I underestimate? The answers may be hard to hear, but they are the raw material for forging a weapon. Pain is the only thing that strips you of naivety. It's a lesson no school can teach, a training no strategy can replace. When you know how to turn it into a tool, you not only become immune to the old attack, but also learn to recognize newer, more sophisticated versions. What knocks others down with a sudden strike will only make you smirk, because you've seen it before and know exactly how to sidestep it. Weaponizing pain does not mean living in bitterness. Bitterness drains your energy into meaningless revenge, Weaponizing means using it to reinforce discipline and strategy. You train when you don't want to, not out of enjoyment, but because you remember the times you were underestimated. You stay silent under provocation not from fear, but because you know this silence lowers the opponent's guard. You reject compromises that weaken your position, not out of arrogance, but because you once lost everything by accepting them. The mirror of darkness doesn't only reflect those who hurt you, it also reflects the part of yourself that enabled it. It could be your blind trust, your fear of conflict, or your need for acceptance at any cost. Identifying these is not about self-blame, it's about ensuring they no longer exist in your current version. This is how you reclaim control from the past. When you view pain as a map, every event becomes a coordinate leading to your present position. Each betrayal teaches you to test loyalty before investing. Each failure teaches you to check the structure before building. Each abandonment teaches you to generate your own strength so you never depend on others again. These lessons, if carved deep, form a defense and attack system that others cannot see but will always collide with. The difference between a survivor and someone crushed is not in who suffers less, but in how they use what they suffered. The crushed see pain as a life sentence, a reason to stop trying. The survivor, and beyond that, the dominator sees pain as a resource. This resource cannot be bought, borrowed, or stolen. It can only be earned by standing up after being beaten to the point you thought there was nothing left. You cannot weaponize pain if you still seek sympathy from it. Every time you retell the story for pity, you're using it to buy cheap attention instead of long-term strength. But when you tell it as a strategic lesson, every detail becomes a bullet, every memory a shield. You don't need an audience to grieve, you need a mental arsenal ready when you step onto the battlefield. Weaponizing pain also demands you abandon a dangerous habit, avoiding the truth. The truth that part of why you were hurt was because you weren't prepared, weren't cautious, or misjudged someone. Accepting this is the first step to ensuring history doesn't repeat. Pain is the alarm bell. Turning it into a weapon means turning that bell into an early warning signal for every future battle. Every scar you carry is not just proof of what you've endured, it's the blade you can draw when needed. It reminds you that you have survived the worst, and if necessary, you can survive again. The difference is that this time, you won't just survive, you'll win. And when you stand before the mirror, looking into eyes that once burned with pain, you will no longer see the gaze of a victim. Instead, you'll see the gaze of someone who knows that, in the darkness, they learned how to sharpen everything that once tried to destroy them. Need is the chain that binds a person into the hands of others. As long as you need love, validation, an apology, or a nod of approval, you remain under someone else's control. Need makes you predictable, easy to manipulate, and easy to discard at any moment. To become untouchable, you must cut each of those chains not by denying your emotions, but by reclaiming power from the very things you once depended on. Absolute detachment does not mean you feel nothing. On the contrary, you still have emotions and desires, but you don't allow them to become conditions for your existence. You can cherish love without relying on it to survive. You can welcome recognition without needing it to know your worth. You step out of the endless loop of waiting for someone to save you and begin building a state of psychological self-sufficiency. When you remove need, every power play against you loses its effect. Manipulators always exploit the gaps inside you, the fear of abandonment, the hunger for acknowledgement, the obsession with proving your worth. Once those gaps are gone, they lose their leverage. You become a mirror reflecting their powerlessness, and that alone forces them to step back. Absolute detachment is the ability to look at a relationship, an opportunity, even a dream, and know you can walk away instantly if it harms your position or your peace. No bargaining, no clinging, no inventing reasons to stay when every signal has sounded the alarm. This demands a form of iron discipline, the discipline to keep immediate emotions from dictating long-term fate. The truth is, most people imprison themselves out of fear of losing what they think they cannot live without. But look back. How many times did you think you couldn't survive losing someone? yet you're still here. How many times did you believe an opportunity was one of a kind, only to discover it was just one of many paths? Each time you survived a loss, you proved that need was only an illusion you fed yourself. When you reach absolute detachment, you step into a new domain of strength. You no longer feel pressured to react just to keep the peace. You no longer make decisions from fear of losing validation. Every choice is measured against a single criterion. Does it strengthen or weaken your core? If the answer is weaken, it has no place in your life, no matter how much you once craved it. What makes absolute detachment powerful is the silence it creates. You don't need to announce you've changed, nor declare you're no longer dependent. The truth shows in how you act. No chasing, no asking permission, no unconditional compromise. Others will feel this distance, and that distance forces them to adjust their approach. Many fear detachment will leave them lonely. In reality, it only removes connections built on dependency. What remains are voluntary relationships where both sides exist alongside each other because they want to, not because they have to. This is the only kind of bond that lasts, because it is not threatened by one side walking away. Absolute detachment is also a test for yourself. When a situation triggers your fear of loss, can you stand still, observe, and decide with reason rather than instinct? When a sweet promise is made, can you stay clear-eyed enough to judge it by evidence rather than hope? When an opportunity arises, can you refuse it if it demands you abandon your established boundaries? These moments define whether you are living in freedom or still a prisoner of need. Ending all need does not make you cold. It makes you unbreakable. You can lose, but you won't collapse. You can hurt, but you won't beg. You can stand alone, but you will never drift aimlessly. This is the kind of strength that cannot be borrowed, cannot be faked. It can only be built from within. Once you reach absolute detachment, you will see the world operate differently. You are no longer pulled into draining emotional whirlpools. You are no longer bound by the expectations of others. You move through chaos with the calm of someone who knows nothing external can decide their fate. And in that state, you don't just live free, you live with absolute power over the only territory you truly own, yourself. Betrayal is not a surprise, it is a rule. Every relationship, every alliance, every oath of loyalty exists on the foundation of interest. When the interest disappears or changes, loyalty disappears with it. Only the naive are shocked when betrayal happens. Those who understand the rules of the game prepare for it long before it arrives, and preparation is what turns betrayal into an advantage instead of a tragedy. Anticipating betrayal begins by noticing the smallest details: how someone's tone changes when you are at a disadvantage, how they remain silent when you are under attack, how they move closer when you are at your peak. These signs often emerge unconsciously. They haven't betrayed you yet, but their mind has already left the alliance. When you catch this early, there's no need to panic. You simply adjust your distance and plan your next move. You don't build strategy on blind trust. You trust in evidence, in behavior, and in how someone acts when they no longer benefit from you. True loyalty only shows itself when you are in difficult times, and most will fail this test. Not because they are evil, but because they are weak. Weakness makes people choose their own safety over keeping their word to others. Anticipating betrayal doesn't make you paranoid, it makes you realistic. You stop investing too deeply in what hasn't been tested. You never give power to anyone without having a plan to take it back. You maintain enough strategic distance to withdraw without losing all your resources. That way, when betrayal comes, you don't collapse, you simply change tactics. But anticipating betrayal is only half the journey. The other half is becoming the storm. The storm does not avoid dark clouds, it becomes the dark clouds. It doesn't wait for the tempest to pass, it is the tempest. This means you don't just defend, you actively shape the environment to your advantage. Instead of letting betrayal alter your course, you use it as fuel to launch into a stronger phase. Becoming the storm is the shift from reacting to commanding. You no longer move in response to someone else's play. You make the move that forces them to respond. You no longer live to avoid being hurt. You live to claim and expand your territory of mind, resources, and influence. The storm needs no one's approval to exist, and it doesn't announce its arrival. A storm has power because it cannot be predicted. You maintain this unpredictability by keeping your intentions hidden, changing your pace, and never letting anyone see your full plan. People can guess, but when they act on their guess, you are already one step ahead. In this way, you make betrayal a one-sided game. They can only attack doors you have already locked. Becoming the storm doesn't mean destroying everything recklessly. It means knowing when to unleash your power and when to hold it back. Power is not always in a direct strike. Sometimes it lies in silent pressure, in the unease you plant in someone's mind simply through your presence. When you are the storm, you are no longer bound by your old image. People will say you've changed, and they're right. You are no longer a player seeking to be liked. You are the one setting the rules. They may hate you, fear you, or respect you, but no one can ignore you, and that is the state of true power. Each time betrayal comes, see it as a reminder that you are on the right path. It confirms you have become important enough for others to feel the need to remove you. Instead of stepping back, step forward with twice the force. Turn every stab in the back into energy to expand your influence and reinforce your mental fortress. The storm never apologizes for existing. It doesn't seek forgiveness for what it destroys, because it knows that destruction was necessary to reshape the field. And when you enter this state, you will no longer fear betrayal, loss, or judgment. You will focus on one thing: moving forward, unstoppable, uncontrollable, and irreplaceable. At that point, you will not just survive betrayal, you will use it as the ignition to become a force that both enemies and allies must account for. And once you have become the storm, you will understand. Ultimate power is not in avoiding damage, but in turning every blow into the wind that pushes you farther than anyone could imagine.